BCPWEDNESDAY.com. I'm Evan Wren, and this is the Big Country Preps Wednesday Night Podcast, our weekly look at the area athletic scene, what happened last week, and what's going on this week. I'm here with my partner, Dan Youngblood, via Zoom. And tonight, Dan, this is our first podcast of the school year, and we are welcoming back basically a big country coaching legend. Wayne Hutchinson is back at the helm in Stamford, and he joins us this evening.
Yeah, and it's going to be cool to talk to Coach Hutch. Obviously, we were both fortunate enough to cover that first run he had at Stamford. Saw him take the Bulldogs to 3 straight state championship games, winning the last 2 with what I would argue is probably one of the greatest collections of small school skill talent that you'll ever find anywhere. When you look at what those guys went on to do collegiately, and in the case of James Washington at the NFL level. So, I mean, it was really fun, obviously, to get to cover those. And when we heard the news that he was coming back to the big country and back to Stamford, I think both of us kind of popped a little bit. We got excited about the opportunity to see what he could do there. So it's going to be really cool to talk to Coach Hutchinson and just kind of see, you know, where his mind's at and kind of what his thoughts on this team that he inherited, because it looks like he's got a pretty good opportunity to have some more success there at Stamford.
All right. And with that, before we get started on tonight's podcast, we want to thank a couple of our sponsors, namely For the Love of the Game Broadcasting and our old friend Terry Slavens, owner of KLAX 93.5 FM out of Breckenridge, 97.7 FM KATX out of Eastland, Classic Country AM 1330 out of Graham, 94.7 FM KWKQ out of Graham, KROO 1430 AM out of Breck, and KWBY 98.5 FM out of Ranger. That is For the Love of the Game Broadcasting. Also, Rob Durham, sales consultant at Bear Chevrolet Buick Cadillac up in Breckenridge. If you're in the market for a vehicle new or used, give Rob a shout. He's one of the nicest guys you'll ever want to meet. Call him at 254-559-2266. That's Rob Durham up at Bear Chevrolet Buick Cadillac in Breckenridge. All right. And with that, a quick reminder, you YouTubers out there, please hit the subscribe button and also hit the little bell that pops up after you hit that subscribe button. That way you'll get notifications each and every time we come up with a new podcast here at Big Country Preps. So please subscribe, won't you please? We appreciate it.
All right, let's go ahead and jump into this week's show before we get Coach Hutchinson on and talk a little bit about the start of football season. We're finally here, finally seen a couple of games, got out and saw some. You had a good first week with your Big Country Game of the Week. Hawley at Jim Ned, big matchup. Let's talk briefly about that one. What did you see? What were some impressions from that game?
That the biggest impression that I got is that Jim Ned's offensive line is ferocious. Not only is it, I mean, the front line, the starters are great, and then they go too deep across the board, so they can bring in fresh bodies when they want to, and that's one of the better offensive lines I've seen in a while. I think it ranks right up there with when they won a state championship a few years ago. This is that was the key weapon for Jim Ned that night. It really was. They played very well defensively as well. They completely shut down Hawley's running game. They won the war in the trenches. That's where that game hinged. And Jim Ned is, first impressions from what I saw the other night, that's a regional threat. That ball club right there, that's a regional threat.
Yeah, and that offensive line's kind of always been the staple of Coach Fanning's squad. So if they're playing that well this early, that's a good sign for that group. But for me, I was out at the Brownwood Wiley game and saw a young Brownwood team really impressed. They beat Wiley 35-21, had a 28-7 lead in the fourth quarter. And I'm telling you what, man, we knew this going into the season, but Icall is a bad man. That kid can really play. Had over 160 rushing yards. Wiley at one point cut it to 7 points late in the fourth quarter. Could have gotten the ball back with a stop and a chance to tie. And Hall busts a 66-yard run to seal it. But yeah, Brownwood, I think that was a really good first showing for them, just from the fact that that's a really young offense. Ike was the only offensive starter returning. Very good defensively, as expected. This Brownwood team returned a ton on that side of the football and really just shut down the Wiley running game, made them one-dimensional. So just based on that game, I think Wiley will be fine. They got some youth that they're going to be working through and some things. But I think the big takeaway I had from that one was this Brownwood team is going to be a force to be reckoned with again this year. It's going to be interesting to see. But yeah, good first week for those guys as well.
They got a lot of guys in different positions this year, and that's going to be an adjustment for a while. The last, almost every starter from last year offensively except Hall, but the thing is, when he can improvise, when things don't go well, he can improvise and still hurt the opposition, and then they're backed by that defense. This team's
Yeah.
going to be good.
And the thing is,
Team's
with
going to be
him.
good.
Yeah, with him, it's just he just knows the offense so well. The read option game, it's kind of like watching a mini version of Vince Young back at Texas when they were winning national championships. Just he's so good at that read option game that if you bite, he's going to pull and he's going to go a long ways. And that's kind of what happened. Anytime it was a 3rd and long, I mean, he had 3 or 4 conversions that way where he would just fake that read option, pull and go, and they couldn't get him to the ground. But very, very good first showing. And just before we move on and get Coach Hutch on, one other just first impression I had on the season in general, on the local front is watch out for the Abilene Eagles. The Abilene High Eagles look like they're going to be a force to be reckoned with this year. They were up 35-0 at halftime on Odessa Permian, finished up that game 49-14. This is a program that's always good defensively. They've got the most explosive offense that I've seen an Abilene High team have in quite some time, maybe going back to about 2016. This offense, very talented, a lot of weapons. It's going to be fun to see what this group can do. They've got some big games coming up at home as well. So they got one coming up here in a couple of weeks against Midland Legacy, which will be a huge test. But the early returns so far say that this Abilene High team's got something special going, and it'll be interesting to see what they do against Cooper in the Crosstown Showdown this week.
Right. And with that, it's about time to bring on Coach Hutch. This is a conversation I've been looking forward to. You all set?
Yeah, for sure. Looks like he's ready to join us. Let's go ahead and get him on.
All right. Joining us now, Stamford head football coach Wayne Hutchinson. Coach, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Evan.
All right. You're coming off a big win over Hamlin. Tell us overall just your assessment of how well you guys played in week 1.
Yeah, I saw lots of improvement. In fact, I just got through going back over our film from our first 2 scrimmages just to see how we have been progressing, and I can see a lot of progression, both offensively and defensively. And Friday night, I thought we executed really, really well, mainly in the interior parts of our offense and defense. I thought our O-line, D-line are starting to get their pad level down and starting to understand all of our blocking schemes, and it looks like they're playing at a level where they're not having to think, and so that was really good to see. And I thought our skill kids did a really good job out in open space. I think we're catching the ball really well, and I was impressed with our secondary this Friday night. I thought they did a really good job of getting a couple of interceptions and turnovers, and they were in the right spot at the right time. So, overall Friday, I thought we had a really good game.
And you kind of touched on the next question, but how are the players kind of catching on to the new system? Obviously, y'all have brought some changes on both sides of the football. Just kind of how are the kids catching on?
I think they're catching on really well. Coming in, I was concerned about how well we could catch the ball, but from day one, our kids, we have some pretty good athletes that have a knack for catching the ball. And as far as the offensive line, we're still using a lot of the run schemes that was already in place here. We're just kind of tweaking them a little bit. The terminology, the verbiage that we use is probably a little bit different. And so I think our kids have picked that up extremely well. Now, defensively, it's totally different. We're basically in a 3-3 stack defense, whereas I think last year they were in just a 3-4. So, I mean, there's a lot of similarities, but the biggest thing is the verbiage and understanding what that verbiage is, and us being able to relate that to the kids so that the kids don't have to think, and we can turn them loose and let them play.
Coach, now you were retired and you've come back. I was curious if you had settled in. Are you still shaking off some of the ring rust after being away for a little while, or have you pretty well settled in now?
Well, I'll tell you, the heat's about to kill me. But over the summer, I'm an outdoorsman, so I prepared myself for two days. I didn't realize it was going to be this hot, this long this year. But just like anything, you just learn to adapt to it. And Friday being the first game, yeah, obviously I had some jitters being away from it for a year. You're always thinking about, well, did I forget this or did I forget that? But it's slowly but surely coming back to me. And I'll just be honest with you, in the locker room before the game, it kind of got emotional for me. I didn't know what was wrong with me there for a minute. because you're away from it for a year. You don't know if you're ever going to do it again, and then all of a sudden you're back in it, and then all of a sudden here comes the game, and it got here so fast because when I was hired back in the summer, it just kind of hit the ground running, and it doesn't seem like we've even been able to take a breath yet. And so it just got here really fast. So that first game was pretty cool. Get that adrenaline rush that you always get as a coach. That sure didn't change. And then as far as coaching, it comes back to you pretty fast, I guess.
And Coach, you're a guy that's coached and had success at both the small and big school levels. What are some of the biggest differences, when you do, I guess, make that transition, and maybe what are some of the likes and dislikes you have of coaching each?
Yeah, I mean, I can't just pinpoint anything. I mean, you just have to deal with a whole lot more kids at a bigger school, and you have a whole lot more coaches. So you can, as far as organizing your practices, it gets a little tricky on how you organize them to get the best out of the practices that you can, and that's what I'm adjusting to coming back to Stamford is transitioning back to how you organize practice so that we can get the most out of our reps and utilize our coaches the best we can to coach our kids up so that we can execute at a high level. Not as many kids, not as big. I would put our skill, at this level against most bigger schools. But when you get into the interior part, like the O-line, D-line, there's just more of them, more depth, and they're just a little bit bigger. And I guess that's probably the biggest difference.
Coach, we spent a good portion of the preseason talking about how difficult your district is, and then here on week one, you're the only team from that district that got a win. But that's totally misleading, isn't it? Given the competition everybody was facing.
Absolutely, yes. Of course, Holly and Cisco, they're playing some really good football teams, and anytime you play somebody that's really good that matches up to you, you stand a chance to not win. And fortunately, we were able to execute Friday, and I'm not sure, how good. I thought Hamlin looked really good on film in their scrimmages, so I don't really know how to gauge what we're capable of doing. I know we're fixing to get into a tough game this Friday with Haskell. We're going to be tested up front with a really good offensive line, defensive line. So that's going to tell us a lot about ourselves this Friday. And then as our schedule continues, it's just going to get tougher. And we need that, and we need that going into district, because you need to be battle tested before you get to district. So hopefully these next few weeks we can find out a lot about ourselves.
And Coach, obviously your return to Stamford was a homecoming. You had a ton of success there in the first stint. I'm sure you hear from one of them, maybe more than the others, but talk about kind of maybe some contact you've had with your former players. What was the excitement level like from some of those guys to see you back at Stamford?
I did. I got a lot of texts, and if I ran into anybody in town, they definitely congratulated me, and our community's been very supportive and encouraged me, and just made it feel like I was right back at home. So all that's been really, really good, and I think I think our community's excited. I think our kids are excited. I think our coaches are excited. So it's a good place to be. It always has been a good place to be. A lot of tradition here, and I'm just happy to be a part of it.
Coach, in your previous stint at Stanford, it was fun for everybody involved, not just you and your players, but your assistants, your fans, and the media that covered you. It was a fun team to follow. And I'm sure if I asked you what your favorite memories were from your previous stint there, I mean the state championships would immediately come to mind. But I was curious, maybe you could talk about some of the other memories that you would have that were just it's just a lot of fun to think about for you.
Yeah, those were some special years, when especially when we first got here about 2006. It wasn't just the best job on the market at the particular time, and it took 3-4 years to build it to the extent that we built it with our coaching staff and our players. And then, once you get that rolling and the community gets behind you and you get an opportunity to go play at Cowboy Stadium and we had the success that we did, you wanted to go back every year. And it was an expectation every year once you get that rolling. And so, as far as the memories are concerned, it's just unbelievable, the fans in the stands every Friday night, and I'm seeing that again. I saw our stands were filling up on Friday. I saw the same type of atmosphere that we kind of built on, back in our glory days. So, but fondest memories, obviously, like you said, is getting to play in Cowboy Stadium, and there's nothing like that. And once you've tasted it, you want to go back.
And Coach, I kind of touched on this earlier. Obviously, you were blessed with the opportunity to coach your son and get to go through a lot of those, share a lot of those memories with him. Just what was that process like for you? And as a coach, just kind of how special is that?
Well, I had the opportunity to coach both of my boys.
True.
And, this Friday night, I'm going to coach against one of them. So that's not going to be fun. But, I never treated my boys any different than anybody else. And I never was harder on my boys than I was on anybody else on the football team. And I've heard stories of that, that saying, hey, you got to be harder on your own kids because, that they're the coach's kid. But I didn't approach it that way. I just tried to treat every kid on our team. I tried to be firm. I tried to be fair and tried to treat everybody the same. And I didn't do any different with my boys. And I expected them to act just like everybody else on the team. But being able to coach them and getting to watch them every Friday night, that's adrenaline on top of adrenaline, I guess you could say, because you get an adrenaline rush just coaching in the game. And then when your own kids playing in it, you just want them to be successful and you want them to stay healthy and just some great memories.
But you were retired for a year. It didn't take long to come back. So obviously the itch was there fairly quickly. Can you tell us how difficult it was to sit out and watch football from the sidelines for a year? And I mean, that lure was there to come back fairly quickly.
Well, I'll be really honest with you. Retirement was really good, and I'm not sure the itch was there for the whole full year. I only went to a couple of ball games this past year because I was pretty much consumed in remodeling houses and the one that I'm living in. So I was really, really busy this last year. So I really didn't have a lot of time to think about coaching. And I think it really helped, being able to do something different, have all that time, and being away from it, it makes you realize now how much time we actually put in this, in this profession. And so I'm be real honest. I mean, it was a real surprise when I was approached and asked if, this might be a deal for me to become the head coach at Stamford again. And I thought about it long and hard, and I had thought about getting a part-time job this coming year, and I talked to some other coaches, maybe just, doing a part-time job with quarterbacks or just coming, doing something besides carpenter. I was getting tired of being a carpenter. I fish a lot and I play golf a lot, and, you can only do so much of that. And then the more I thought about it, the more I was like, I think I might want to do this again. And then I kept thinking about it, and I was like, I still got some years left in me. I think I can, make a difference in young men and contribute to putting together a good overall program. And the more I thought about it, I just said, well, if I'm going to do it part-time, I might as well just do it full-time. And so once I decided to do it and committed to it, then I was all in. And like I said, hit the ground running since this past summer and haven't looked back yet. And, as long as I feel like I can make a difference in kids and help them grow and contribute to this overall program, then I'll continue to do it.
And just kind of along those lines, you mentioned you have years left in you. Just have you given any thought to how long you'd like to continue coaching, or put any sort of limits on that?
I haven't, no, honestly. And before I retired, I was going to try to put in 35 years. And, sometimes things just, don't work out exactly how you want them to work out. And the timing was right when I retired last year to come back. And my wife and I wanted to come back to Stamford because she grew up in Wynard. I grew up in Knox City. And then, we have a lot of friends here in Stamford, and we like the location, and we like the people. So, that's pretty much why, why we moved back here. And so anyway, that's why we're here.
All right. Well, Coach, we appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us. And as always, we'll stay in touch with you throughout the season, be keeping a close eye on the Stamford Bulldogs, and best of luck to you.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
And that was Stamford head football coach Wayne Hutchinson. It's good to have him back in the big country. He was always a good source, always a good guy, always fun to work with. It'll be interesting to see where the program heads from this point forward. He inherited a program that was already in very good shape and set to improve this season. So really, it's just a matter of staying healthy and getting them to learn all the the terminology, and they should be fine. Really.
Yeah, I mean, I echo every one of those sentiments. It's obviously really cool to see him back in the big country, particularly given what he accomplished the first stint at Stamford. Pretty cool to see that homecoming. And you're exactly right. He basically inherited a team that is almost tailor made for what he likes to do offensively. They brought back a ton of skill talent, a good solid line that can adapt pretty well to that spread that he likes to run. And I think this is going to be one of those situations where he does just kind of hit the ground running. It looks like that was certainly the case the other night against what really should be an improved Hamlin team. When you go out there and beat them 48-6, that tells you right off the bat that this Stamford team is going to be one to watch. But it was cool to get to talk to Coach Hutch and kind of get to see where his mindset's at, because it is kind of interesting when a guy steps away from the game for a little bit to kind of see what drew him back and those sorts of things. But cool to have him back, and I was glad we were able to get him on this week.
All right, with that, it's about time to wrap up this edition of the Big Country Preps Wednesday Night Podcast. But before we do that, we want to remind you real quick that we've got 3 separate subscription packages here at Big Country Preps. We got a monthly for $5 a month. We've got a semi-annual 6-month subscription where we knock that price down to $4 a month. And then we've got an annual 12-month subscription where we knock that price down to $3 a month. And that's $36 for a full year of Big Country high school athletic coverage.
We'd also like to remind you that if you see a photo you like in any one of our galleries, those are available for purchase. Photo downloads are available for just $7. And we also have some keepsakes and prints available. So make sure you check those out. As you're scrolling through the site, you'll notice pretty quickly we take a lot of photos from these games and matches that we're at. It's something we really enjoy doing and something we are very proud of here at BigCountryPreps.com.
All Big Country, all high school, all the time. Welcome home.